been a rough year, dude. We started off losing Judd. We lost Lou and other people. This has been, as far as strength and conditioning goes, this is like the year that makes me want to drink, not like I really need a reason, but yeah.
My dad made an interesting point to me once. He said, you're getting older when all of a sudden, like close friends start dying and people that you think like, I thought that guy had another 20 years and then he passes away. He's like, that's how you know you get old.
Yeah. 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 The gray in my beard, I need to go your route and go clean shaven so that I don't see all this gray, but damn. Yeah.
But no, it was good to have that conversation with Lou and to get that on tape. It was pretty interesting, having known him over the years and to see like he was, it was still Lou, but I could tell he was physically in a lot of pain.
And his voice in that, man, it just, it broke my heart. But, I thought he was immortal. All the things that he'd been through and he came out, golly, but
it might've been you texted me or maybe it was Zach.
Yeah, I did.
Well, I know you did, but I also, I think it was Zach Ebenesh was like, he texted me, he goes, I just got done listening. He's like, I think Louis died from heartbreak. I mean, literally it was like, he sounded heartbroken that he had built and amassed, West Side into what it was. And at the end, he was having to pay guys to come there.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, yeah. Cause I was at the liquor store one and the new one. And, I can imagine, man, how hard that's got to be to see the intensity and the environment that was created there and for it to be gone. For anybody who's never gotten into that sort of environment, I mean, it was crazy, to be able to be in there and train with those guys, the Penoras, the Edwards, the Vogelpols, the Smiths. I remember the day that I felt like I made it was at West Side. We were doing suspended cambered bar. Good morning. The cambered bar that you can't put on a normal rack. You know which one I'm talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the only person to beat me was Luke Edwards, and everybody was ripping on Matt because here I am. I'm like not an outsider because I was there, twice a year, but they're still like, come on, you motherfuckers. You can't let a visitor in here whoop your ass. Luke, what are you going to do? And that guy looked like he was just released from the insane asylum whenever he went out and he got that lift. And he was so happy whenever I couldn't make it. And, but that environment for those people who never got in there, man, people are always looking for a struggle and a challenge and things to fight against. I think because I had that challenge and that fight and that struggle, from training in West Side, I don't see the need to go out and do some of these just stupid fights that I see people having from time to time. And that's related back to, I've been thinking about that, John, since you had brought up that struggle on Lou's episode. And I'm like, yeah, I think this is why some of the people that have made it to the highest levels are the ones who've gone through the most shit because they know what's worth fighting for and against. And whenever somebody has never actually had a true struggle, they look for, I always go back to this Jon Stewart book, Jon Stewart America, that man on pumpkin sex is an inalienable right and everything else. And I'm like, man, that's what some people are fighting for because they've never had that real struggle. And
I've always been fearful that people don't encounter hardship early enough in life. I remember when I was, I don't know if I've told this story before. I probably have. We have fucking 600 episodes. But when I went to go get my shoulder surgery, as I was talking with Dr. Hance, we were talking about pain, and I have an unusually high threshold of pain. Like I broke my leg, played 17 weeks with a broken leg. I mean, I've dislocated fingers and reset them. Like my pain threshold is pretty impressive to the point where after shoulder surgery, I was like, don't give me any painkillers, just do a nerve block, and a few days later I'll be fine. And my shoulder actually felt better coming out, like immediately waking up out of surgery than it did going in.
Well, definitely while you're waking up, you got the nerve block there.
Yeah, well, the nerve block, and then like 2 days later it wore off and it was fine. And so we were talking about pain threshold, and I was like, dude, just my whole life, like the ability to like pain doesn't affect me the same way. It's why I don't think I ever, took painkillers regularly. Like a lot of guys I played with chewed painkillers like breath mints. I mean, I took them on very few on occasion, but not to the point where, you're chewing 40, 60 Vicodin every day.
And so are we talking ibuprofen or are we talking Vicodin when you're saying painkillers? Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm pretty well with you there. You know, ibuprofen is about the most that I hit after most of my surgeries.
Yeah.
Save for my last one that was on that sinus thing that almost killed me. That I just didn't want to remember a fucking thing until, you know, for like another week because it was just so horrible.
So yeah, I think part of the reason that I was able to survive and do well post game was because I didn't take the amount of Vikes. I mean, I was just talking to another former NFL player, a couple weeks ago, and he's like, dude, I was 20, 30 of these things a day, and I was like, dude, I might have taken 20 or 30 across my entire NFL career. And Dr. Ants made an interesting point where he goes, there's studies to show that kids that go through some form of pretty severe pain early on in their life, it dulls them as they go on. And I broke my collarbone when I was about 5 or 6. My older brother picked me up and power slammed me. We were playing like flag football or tackle football, and he fucking busted my collarbone. And our doctor, who was our next door neighbor, reset it in our kitchen and then made me a little dish towel sling, and that was how we rolled. And so like all these kind of different things that happened, he's like, maybe you just experience things at a younger age that effectively have dulled you later on, or you could just have a high threshold for pain. But I think a lot of this goes in the same, like people that encounter hardship early on. And you hear these stories like the Michael Jordans getting cut out of their high school basketball. Yeah. And, a bunch of these stories of these individuals who didn't attain greatness, that got beat down, that had to come back and find a new way to do something, ends up being the marker. And what I always worried about is like, and I've even said this to my daughters, I'd be nervous if like you don't have any hardship or you don't understand defeat until you're in your 30s, or like you don't experience heartbreak until you're in your 30s or 40s. I think people that experience things at a younger age have greater resilience later on.
Dude, yeah, I think that too. And, I don't want to talk about it today. I'm not emotionally prepared for it. I talked about some of it there at the symposium, whenever it was, I can't remember how many years ago that was now.
2018. Shit, doesn't it feel like fucking 20 years ago?
Sometimes, but 1990 feels like, 10 years ago. So
yeah. Well, it's funny. People will be like, oh, it's a 20-year-old car. And in my head, I'm thinking something from the 80s. And then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. That was okay. That would be the early 2000s.
Yeah. Yeah. That I'm doing that all the time. And, but yeah, no, I'm with you, man, that the stuff that I went through early childhood, it's like, I hear people complaining and I'm like, dude, nobody's shooting at me. I'm good. So that's where I'm at.
Well, I mean, it's perspective,
Yeah.
And I think a lot of what we're feeling in this present climate is people, I think, will inherently create hardship when there isn't any. Like the fact that things have never been so good, and yet you talk to people, the whole world's ending. I mean, they're it blows my mind that, as good as things are, I mean, we've never been in this good a time, yet people will continue to find ways to create hardship. And a lot of times it's just imaginary.
Yeah. Yeah. I 100% see that many, many times, that there's so much hardship that people are going through and they're having true reactions to it. But it's like, dude, you know what? How about you just take a couple of deep breaths and you turn around and you look and everything's still there. Nothing is crumbling. The earth did not fall. The sky did not fall. Chill. And then if you'll actually take a breath and address it in some sort of logical manner, everything tends to work out, as opposed to this freaking out and throwing stuff and crying and all that. Is that a freaking helmet behind you, Tex?
Oh yeah. You want me to put it on?
Yeah, it's a Knight's helmet from one of our programs from Hammer. Yeah, Hammer. Yeah. So all the imagery that you see around here is themes within our programs, other than the deer skulls, which I've killed here, which Harry hates. But everything else fits in it. So.
Oh, that's nice. This is where is it? This isn't in the shop.
No, this is in the barn.
Is it?
Yeah, this is in our barn, our office. Hey, Power Athlete Nation. I need to take a few moments to thank our sponsor, Power Athlete Training Systems, for providing the best training programs in the universe, in the metaverse. I mean, really, if this is the Matrix, and I'm pretty sure we're stuck in the Matrix, Neo and Morpheus are uploading Power Athlete Training Systems. I'm pretty sure they're doing Field Strong. What do you think, McQuilkin?
Oh, I agree. They are on a specific training program for what they need. And to find out what you need, listeners, head to powerathletehq.com/training and take our little survey to find the perfect training program for you.
So we have developed training programs specific for an archetype. You want to get jacked, we got Jack Street. If you're looking to foster and develop athleticism, we got Field Strong. You're looking to kick the door off of hinges and smash things and cut up and just be a fucking badass, we got Hammer. If your first experience in terms of lifting weights and getting used to a barbell using a basic linear progression with Bedrock, that's the right one for you. And if you have a few miles underneath your belt, maybe a few kids, Fortune 500 CEO, or maybe life's getting a little in the way, I want you to check out Grindstone. And if your job and your desire is to fucking wad your face off, I want you to go check out Johnny Wad. And if you want to stack on a little Johnny Bot on that and hit a little bodybuilding accessory, we got that too. So what we've done is we've created this amazing catalog of services, these training programs designed for archetypes, and every one of them fits a specific user. And you know what? If you want to find that user, go on. I want you to take the survey, and then I want you to click on and take our 7-day free trial and see which one is right for you. Best in class training. And
for less than $1 a day, you get it delivered straight to the mobile app Train Heroic.
Mm-hmm. And if you want to sign up for our newsletter, you can go to powerathletehq.com / or / newsletter. I want you to go to that, sign up for the newsletter where you can get more information, not only on training programs, get discounts on shop on the merch, and really just know what's going on within Power Athlete with the Academy and some of our other initiatives.
And the latest episodes of Power Athlete Radio,
which is really the most important thing. Power Athlete Radio, the premier podcast in strength and conditioning, and your resource for the best information on training, nutrition, cars, maybe some movies, banter. I mean, we've been on other fitness podcasts, and when it comes to banter, we can fucking out-banter anybody.
Yes. And if you're a big fan of Power Athlete Radio, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. Hit us with a 5-star review that we will read.
If you leave us an amazing 5-star review, we will read it on air. And believe me, I love reading the reviews, especially the 5-star ones, because it lets us know we're doing a good job.
And we got some very creative listeners out there.
We do. I mean, that's why there are people.
Yes. Throw your hat into the ring. Again, head to powerathletehq.com / training for all your training needs. Take a little survey, find out what you're training for. 7-day free trial on that program, and training for less than $1 a day.
Thanks for Power Athlete Radio for sponsoring this podcast. See ya.
Bye. Taking back to the episodes in which we recorded with you, Brian, Luke's kitchen, and then up in the gym shop.
Oh, yeah.
So you haven't even experienced new or old studio.
No, yeah. Yeah, I was expecting to kind of see, the whatever truck John was building behind you guys whenever we were doing this. So
I am so deep. I've caused so much headache for myself in terms of like what I've attempted to do. It's like when people are like, what are you working on? Like it was, I took my son to flag football yesterday, and one of the other dads is a pretty high-end spine and neck surgeon, like one of the top guys in the world. And he's a Berkeley grad. So he's worked on a bunch of NFL guys. So we ended up just kind of becoming friends. So I met his wife for the first time. And she's like, oh, my husband, doesn't shut up about, Cal and Golden Bears and the whole deal. And I'm like, yeah, I completely understand. But as we were going through it, I was driving one of my trucks, and she's like, is this your truck? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, so what do you do? I'm like, I can't really explain it, but I know we just bang on a lot of metal.
Yeah. Well,
there you go. I mean,
half
that's
of
true.
what you do, travel the world and teach people how to teach people to lift weights.
We still are banging metal. I mean, they were banging iron, banging metal.
Oh, yeah. And it's trucks, too.
Yeah, trucks. It's everything. I mean, it's same with football. You're banging helmets. When we were kind of pre-prepping for this, the one thing that kind of struck me, and I wanted to get your opinion on this, what is the world, more importantly, what does strength and conditioning look like post Louis Simmons?
I don't know. And it's scary. And some people keep telling me, oh, this is you got to step up. You got to fill this void. And I'm like, man, you can't fill that void. I think what we're going to, here's what I hope doesn't happen. I hope that, okay, hold on. I already dropped an F-bomb, so I got to be careful now.
You can curse as much as you want on this podcast.
Yeah, no, it's like if it gets back to the dean or something like that, public professional demeanor crap and whatever.
Well, then we can edit that out. Charles, edit out any F-bombs or just put in like a pop, pop little sound.
Cool.
Okay?
Cool. And maybe just throw it in there a couple of times randomly, just so that they don't know what I'm actually saying.
I got it.
But here's what I hope doesn't happen. I hope that it's not just a bunch of people on Instagram who've got a bunch of followers and they're the people who are filling the voids, man, because that's not real. You know, it needs to be the people that have been down in the trenches who've got this, literally, who've got the scars from making mistakes, who have got, you know, the man in the arena speech. You know, that's who needs to be the people that we're looking forward for, not somebody who is, I've had some undergrads who've got like 100,000 followers as a fitness influencer. And I'm like, you don't know your head from a hole in the ground. You're so full of shit on everything you say, but you're so confident about it because you've never been under a bar.
Yeah.
Like, dude, yeah, you're 25 pound dumbbells and keeping constant tension on the muscle to increase mechanical and metabolic damage. Yeah, no kidding. But you know what? 25 pound dumbbells aren't going to get it done. What sort of mechanical damage is being done by 25 pound dumbbells? I mean, come on. But that's what I'm hoping doesn't happen. What needs to happen are the people like myself, like Zach, like so many other, the Windlers of the world that have just kind of been, man, screw this social media stuff. It's a pain in my ass and everything. Just to step up, tell everybody else to shut the F up. And this is what you do. And this is why, because I've got these scars that, you know, from the mistakes that I've made. You stand on my shoulders and you're going to see further than I've seen. But that's, you know, I guess for that to really happen, we old people like me need to learn how to use some of this stuff and make it look good, because otherwise nobody's going to listen. And that's the sad aspect of it. I tried to do one, what is that? Ask me anything type stuff on Instagram. And, you know, it comes through your stories and shit. I don't know how to use that very much. The responses that I got for the questions were, you suck at this. The words are covered up by something else. I'm like, hey, great. How about you tell me how to improve rather than say, hey, you're stupid. And also for the people who were saying you're dumb, these are also people I've never heard of, you know, before. So that kind of gives some of what I would take from their statements. But, you know, that's what needs to happen is Zach's and myself and the other people that have been doing this for 20, 30 years. We need to just be the ones to step up and be like, all right, this is what needs to happen. Here's the direction we're going.
Quick note, John, that was a conversation essentially we had with the responsibility of the podcast is to seek out these people who we happen to also be connected with and have a developed relationship and know who they've worked with, know who they've trained, and then I'll provide them an opportunity, a platform for an excellent conversation. And this Brian was following us getting big time by a couple of high follower influencers. And John essentially laid down, okay, let's refocus on the mission of Power Athlete Radio and you know, move it.
We reached out to some individuals that have big followings and they kind of ghosted us a little bit. And I remember like looking and being like, first of all, these people are fucking nobodies in the grand scheme of like the training space, because they got a YouTube channel and they've done a bunch of fucking, you know, vlogs where they've talked about this and their hardship and all this other fucking nonsense. And they got a bunch of dope marketing. They have a ton of followers. And at the end of the day, I'm like, dude, I don't fucking mean to big time anybody ever. But at the end of the day, I mean, shit, dude, I got a decade in the NFL. I got a long time training with the world's best. And, I call Louis Simmons on the phone. He answers and comes and does a podcast when he hasn't done one in years. And, there's cachet to that. And I told Tex, I'm like, first of all, fuck these people. Fuck chasing them around. I don't, anybody that doesn't understand the weight of what we're doing, basically go fuck themselves. They should be kissing our ass to come on here to have an excellent conversation. Because I believe personally for Power Athlete Radio, and this is not because it's our podcast, our guest list and the individuals that we brought on, I believe are the best and the best. I mean, we've had the best conversations with the smartest individuals. And a lot of times people that the fucking masses don't know, which to me isn't indicative. So there's this like weird social media credit where, and it's like it reminds me of bodybuilding forums back in the day where the dude that has 17,000 posts, is the expert. Well, I mean, like we're in this situation where if you have 1 million followers, obviously you know what the fuck you're doing. But a lot of times you fucking don't. I mean, you have a guy like Brian Mann who's actually doing the research that, is the cutting edge on, velocity based and here and all this other good stuff. And, there's probably a ton of people that are pinching it that probably have way more followers than you. And all of a sudden now they look like the experts and you're like, well, first of all, where's your fucking lab? Who are you working with? Where's your research? But the problem is nobody gives a shit because, it's, it's just very disingenuous. And like a text said, the mission of the podcast has always been, not only the premier podcast in strength conditioning, but shining light on individuals that are doing the best in the business, not somebody that just has the fucking most amount of Instagram followers because they want to fucking train in their underwear.
What they freaking didn't, why they ghosted you is probably because they knew they'd get found out.
That's exactly what John said.
That's what I said too. I'm like, dude, like it's kind of like you're, like a PhD. That people, I could get it, fucking go get it. Just sign up, go get a PhD. The only thing more difficult, go play 10 years in the NFL. That's one you can't fucking buy your way into. You either do it or you do or you don't.
Yeah, no, freaking put up or shut up, man. The PhD, it's hard. It's not easy. Anybody can get a PhD if they are persistent and have enough tenacity. Because I assure you, it's not my intelligence that allowed me to get a PhD. Because I am freaking dumb. If you need no other reasoning or no other proof, I went out with Brandon Lilly at your deal, and I was the only one that went out with Brandon Lilly that night. I had a blast, but it was a rough next morning. I'll tell you that.
You got way more fight in you than I do. I see that, and I'm like, I got to go the other way. I got to get up and actually be a human being tomorrow. You guys fucking went hard, which I fucking appreciate. I've been thinking a lot on this piece, man. Like what does the world look like post Louis? And one of the most hilarious things that when we were at Westside, when we got to talk to Lou, and it was actually Tom that said this, he goes, Lou doesn't really do podcasts, but he'll do yours. And I asked him, I'm like, how's this whole kind of social media influencer thing going? He goes, some guy came in, introduced himself to Lou as at, whatever his handle was. And Louis like, your name is at? And the guy's like, no, that's my handle on Instagram. It's at, fitness junkie 9 million or something. And Louis just like shook his fucking head and turned around and walked away and didn't talk to the dude. And the dude was like couldn't fathom it. And, Louis comes from I was trying to give people perspective. The first time I heard about Westside, it was one of their videos. Kevin Doherty was my roommate in college. He had these Westside, bench videos. And at the end, in this grainy, shitty thing that you had to send away, and they sent it to you in a manila envelope, there's a phone number,
614-801-2060.
Yep. And you know what? It was a good chance Lou either picked up or Doris picked up, and then she'd be like, whoa, and scream. And Louis would come to the phone. Hello, Louis, Westside Barbell. And
that was their home phone number forever.
Yeah, forever. That was rang at their house. And if if there was no answering machine, it was because he was training, and you got to call back at another time. And that's how this shit existed. And
you know why the number changed? Because a bunch of people started showing up at their house instead of the gym. So they would be able to look up the number and get an address from there. So then instead of people just randomly showing up at the gym, they were showing up at their house. At least that's what Doris told me.
No,
I was calling, because I've got that number just etched into my brain from calling it so many times from age 20 on that, I would still call it, and then I'd have to go look up the number on the website because I couldn't remember what the new one was. Wow.
Yeah. I've just been thinking a bunch on this, like, what does strength conditioning look like? And you know what? It's kind of an interesting piece because I think Louis was such an innovator, not only with his equipment, the Westside deal. Yeah. And I remember when he first hit me up to go out there, he sent me his book of methods, and, of course he's so generous. He sent me all their stuff, and I read it thinking that, there was going to be a test, obviously, when we showed up. And when I got there, I realized that nothing of what they were doing in the book was happening in Westside. And I asked him, I'm like, hey man, you write this and this, and this is what's happening. And he's like, well, this is the book of Westside. What happens at Westside has to happen, and it's a malleable program, and this is what the adjustments, and this is what I see. And the existence of Westside happens in this environment, but you only know it once you're in the crucible, Yeah.
Yeah. Lou was real interesting. One of the things that I noticed about him was he would talk to anybody, but there was levels of getting through. You had to prove that you knew and you cared and you did all the, these other things. And then he would give a deeper layer of information. And, so it was pretty interesting the way things went there. It's like you had to earn your way in, even as, of course you had to earn your way in as a lifter, and then you had to earn your way in through the knowledge and information. And, he would give people answers, but it wasn't always everything. And then later, after 3 years or so of me coming out there, it was, I asked a question, and then 3 hours later, we would have the answer, and we would have deep dove on everything. And it was, for those who didn't get to experience that in their life, I feel sorry for them, because that's something that I greatly treasured, was how deep, and not just the depth that he went, but I wonder how much money that guy lost by talking to me instead of making more videos or writing more things or whatever. And it was complete passion, what led to that. And that's what I hope I can pass on from Louis, is that that sort of passion that I try not to big time people, but sometimes it happens, especially at conference. I mean, shoot, I felt like shit whenever I couldn't talk to you for longer, John, at that thing, at the, whatever that was, whenever I was in Texas, San Antonio, right?
The TSAC.
Oh yeah.
No. It was at
the coaches.
That was it. Yeah. It was a coaches conference. It was just a passing handshake that I could do, and then I had to run on. Yeah, because
dude, you're never gonna hurt my feelings, dude.
Yeah, but that's something I hope I can do, and I know that there's times whenever I have big time people, it completely unintentionally, just because I'm too freaking busy.
Did the whole velocity? I mean, I had a pretty interesting conversation with Louis about the Tendo and velocity based training.
Yeah.
And I remember he made an interesting point where he said, when they set up the Tendo, Dave Tate was the fastest on everything, but yet he was by far the weakest in the gym. Now, I don't know if that was Louis just, motherfucking Dave. They had a tumultuous relationship, but he's like, that thing was, Dave was the fastest on it, and won everything, but it was by far the weakest in the bench and the squat and the deadlift. And he goes, it's not indicative of total strength. And I wondered if that was just the way they were using it, or if that was kind of the initial kind of for you to start down this road.
The initial, man, I don't know if you guys want this, but I could send it to you. Rick actually sent me the picture from the day that, VBT was born. And I put it on my Facebook, I think a while back, but, yeah. So for some of it, yeah, I think Lou was coming back at Dave, because I mean, Lou comes at everybody. So, whatever, if he doesn't come at you, that means, that you're a real piece of shit. But, but yeah, so as far as that goes, there are force velocity relationships, and a lot of times they are going to deviate on the velocity of the spectrum. By velocity of the spectrum, I mean that unloaded, those jumps, the 20%, the 30% and lower. That's where a lot of the deviations are going to occur. And it's absolutely true that the velocity into the spectrum does not dictate the force into the spectrum. If you look, and whenever you want to get deep into that, you really start looking at the research by J.B. Marin with a tremendous amount of force velocity profiles he's got. And we'll be publishing some research, I'd say, within the next 2 years from here with athletes and how they respond to different forms of training and things. But yeah, it's absolutely right. If you, just because you're the strongest at the velocity of the spectrum does not mean you're the strongest at the force of the spectrum. I mean, shoot, at least on the squat and bench, Pat Ivy would kick my ass on the velocity stuff, all the dynamic effort stuff. He beat me. But on bench day and squat day, max effort, I had him. And that's the way it was every time, unless it was deadlift. And I mean, that dude's hands wrapped around the bar 4 freaking times. And
he's got long arms.
Dude, yeah. I mean, my arm, I can't even reach the bottom of my pockets, right? At standing with my arm length. Great for bench, horrible for everything else. But
Pat Ivy does hold the record for the most perfectly manicured hairline and mustache that we've ever had on the podcast.
I'm sure he does, as opposed to me. I got this bushy shit going on right now. I just don't care.
I was like, Pat, I don't know how this, I mean, does this just grow in like this, or do you have a team of individuals that help you achieve this? And he was like, he just started fucking laughing. It's like
there's a team and he spends hours on it. I don't know.
He has a team that spends hours both.
Yeah.
We'll post a picture of Pat Ivy on the here.
Let's get the pre-team and post-team beard pictures. I bet that would be great.
Oh shit. So with the Tendo stuff, I mean, this is, and then obviously going into velocity-based training, I mean, this even takes a step back farther into, for me as a, and this is so interesting for me as a young kid, training in Zengis' garage, him talking about compensatory acceleration and more importantly, Fred Hatfield. And the idea of as mechanical advantage increases, so does speed. And the idea of like, I want you to be so violent with the weights. I want you to try to fucking break them. And, this is, me at 14 years old, not really understanding what this old man's trying to teach me, which is I want you to fucking break these motherfuckers. I want you to be so violent with weights that if somebody's watching, I want them to come over and be like, seriously, you're going to hurt yourself. And that was, 14 years old. I mean, same thing with punching. I don't want you just to punch an individual. I want you to punch 3 to 4 inches through them. So you're trying to punch your hands through the other side. And, this was how we trained. And when I got the chance to go play college in the NFL, there was always this thing like, how come this guy can punch people so hard? How come all this stuff goes? And I'm like, dude, this is what we were trained from the time I was 14 years old. And, you had a 500-pound bench press where you're trying to fucking break people on every punch. It correlates. And it wasn't until we ended up getting the Tendo and started getting into this velocity-based training to realize that this is something that can be cultured and developed over a lifetime if it becomes important at an early age, especially early in the training.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to those, I have to go back and look at the research. There's a book on, I can't call Lou to find the book. It was by a Polish guy and it had to do with, like long-term athletic development. The cover of it was kind of like a pinkish and it had some different implements on the cover too. I want to say the author was Drabick. But like I said, I'd have to call Lou because that was.
We're going to have to get a Ouija board for that one.
Yeah, man. 2002, I think, is whenever I read that book. And that was talking about some of the speed windows for males at 7 and 14 and the girls for 7 and 11, I believe. And so then that's just kind of interesting to me so these speed windows are the times whenever like the nervous system is most primed, most receptive to make those sorts of connections neuromuscularly. And, it's just that you happen to be with somebody who you were at the right place at the right time, man. So you took advantage of that window. That's probably, is that about whenever you hit that growth spurt and then you couldn't move anymore? And then you went in and was Angus. Yeah. So your nervous system was at that prime point, man.
Yeah, no, it was really weird. It was, I started with Angus when I was 14 or 15. And it was, I was pretty fast up until 6th and 7th grade. And then I grew a bunch. And it was actually 8th grade where I was fucking deathly slow. And I've told you the story where like I had to go tell the teacher, I'm like, hey, is there something extra I can do? Because I can't go home and show my mom a fucking D or a C in PE. And she let me do these extra credit runs after school. So I lied to my mom. It's like, hey, I'm going to take the bus and shit. Or you pick me up later. And I would do these extra credit runs so I could get an A. And this is always where I joke with people that like, shame is a powerful fucking motivator. And if we remove the element of shame from people's lives, I'm a little nervous because here I was at 13 years old and I was kind of so embarrassed that I was going to have to go home and show my mom the shitty grade in my report card that I was willing to do anything to not have that shitty grade. And more importantly, not understanding, and not having a resource to reach out to somebody and be like, well, why was I fast and now I'm slow? And somebody be like, well, you just grew fucking 4 inches. You're in this, maturation phase. And I mean, there wasn't anybody around me that could tell. And then all of a sudden I started lifting weights and it was as if like, I can't even like describe it. It was as if once I started lifting weights, I went from uncoordinated to coordinated so quickly that it was like all of a sudden I started lifting weights and I could walk in a straight line, whereas I couldn't do it before.
Yeah. I'm not surprised, man. Yeah. You hit it at that perfect time.
I found the book.
Yeah. And what is it called?
Children in Sports Training, How Your Future Champions Should Exercise to Be Healthy, Fit, and Happy. Dr. Josef Drabick.
Yeah, send me that on Slack. The other thing, though, that Zengis did, which I wouldn't ever recommend, and I think now caused more trouble than it helped, is he had us wear knee wraps, those real tight gold, because, marathon.
Oh, double gold line, baby. Yeah, I remember those.
So George invented those. And
yeah, because he invented the deadlift suit too, right?
Well, he invented the super suit, the squat suit. So he was
it sucked for squat, but whenever you turned it around and used it for deadlift, it was pretty good.
Yeah. Oh, dude, the squat was awful because the seams would rip you to pieces.
Oh yeah, but it's all those single ply suits back then. Holy cow, man!
So he invented the wraps. So he used to have us wrap up pretty early on, and his whole thing was that the wraps are going to speed up the accentuation phase, and that it can give you more drive out of the bottom to increase compensatory acceleration. The only problem is that, your undeveloped knees and whatever, I ended up developing terrible patellar tendonitis from it.
I was going to ask you, did you have Oshkin slaughters?
I did not, but
interesting.
I ended up developing patellar tendonitis because we were smashing the fucking patella into the knee.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like we were, we were like, let's say if I squatted 300 pounds, I was wrapping anything over 200. So, we would do like 1 or 2 warm-ups. And then our first working sets, we wrapped every working set. And the idea was we wanted more pop out of the bottom for more speed. Yeah. And I ended up just developing, it was stupid. Like the tendon strength wasn't there to be able to develop it.
Yeah, no, because it was mechanical being done by all the mechanical strength was being done by the wrap at the bottom instead of that. Now that patella is supposed to actually stick out to improve the, the moment arm for the quadricep so that you would get more pop out of it. So you're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. And then Paul said, no, screw you too. And took everything and gave it to Joe.
Yeah.
So
I understand what he was trying to accomplish. But that would have been fine if I was 18 or 20 after it had already been, pretty strong and, no belt, no wraps, no nothing, and developed pretty good strength and then put it on later in life.
Dude, thinking about the stuff that was available to us and to him at that time, if I went back to whenever we were 14, I can't say that I don't know if I wouldn't have thought that was the best idea because that was making you move faster. They didn't have the bands then to put onto the bar. So where were you going to get more velocity from? Well, something external that would come from the knee wraps. And I kind of, you just don't think about all of the unintended consequences. Okay, that's going to make you go faster, but what's going to occur for the change of the tendon? And I know some people, they might have had this anyways, right? But some of the guys that I was lifting with back in the day, that whenever we started wrapping, and it could have been that it was the vastus lateralis to medialis imbalance, and it got worse from squatting, but they ended up getting chondromalacia. And I just assumed that it was from driving the patella repeatedly down into that, what is that called? The femoral notch.
Yeah, and they were probably sitting back with a vertical shin and then sitting down. And so that the effect was driving forces down into the patella instead of getting positive shin angle and actually getting into like a more neutral position.
Yeah, well, this is high school before I learned how to box squat. So, all the knees were coming forward back then. But yeah, I don't know. If it were the box squat, I'd 100% say on the nose. But yeah, I don't know. Lou always bitched at me about my knees coming too far forward on squatting. So, I don't know if it would have been that or not.
Well, it wasn't. So I fucked the patellar tendonitis plagued me until I got to college and we started wearing Oli shoes. And then I started Olympic squatting and getting a ton of positive shin angle. And once I got my knees over my toes, effectively it strengthened my patellas and I never had patellar tendonitis again.
Yeah, so we were wearing Oli shoes back then to squat in. So there's a guy named Charlie Mclean who was the first person at 181 or below to squat 600 pounds. And this would have been back in he was lifting and powerlifting back in the early 80s, right? So that was raw, or that was ace bandage and whatever. And
tennis balls behind the knees. That's what George
exactly.
Yeah, they would tape tennis balls behind their knees.
Yeah, get a little spring out of the bottom, and he's who got me to start doing that. It was Oli shoes or work boots, and if you have a work boot, trying to find the one with a little bit bigger heel. And I was fortunate. Like everywhere I've been, it's like I'm a sponge. That's the only thing that makes me different from anybody else. I've been at the right place at the right time, and I've been a sponge to the people that were pouring out that information. And, that's what's made me. And it's not anything's. I'm uncomfortable and with this whole thing of people. I got a text from somebody who's like, "Hey, I'd like a call from one of the goats for this job. Would you please call for me?" I'm like, "Dude, don't fucking do that to me."
I fucking hate the term goat.
And
but think LL.
I'm completely
it fucking. I mean, like I could understand like when they used it, like it. I feel like people have attached it to anything. When I'm watching something with some fucking Hollywood actor referring to somebody's, I'm like, get the fuck out of here. There should only be one greatest of all time. And should probably LL Cool J. Maybe you could attach it to Jordan. That's it. Like that's all I give it. Maybe a Tom Brady gets the GOAT, but like at the end of the day, I fucking hate that somebody throws that out. And every time I see it, I cringe a little bit. I'll put that on my cringe memes. There, yeah. I'll hashtag that. But and people, you throw it around so fucking easily. I mean, you could throw it on Louis Simmons, and I'd be like,
absolutely. That's legit.
Yeah.
For me, no, fuck no.
Well, with the evolution of velocity-based training, I mean, obviously you have Fred Hatfield, compensatory acceleration, talking about the torquemeter. You remember him talking about his torquemeter, and then this evolution into the tendo and this. Like, give us a little bit of like history on this and kind of how it started, and more importantly, where we're at today. And then the idea of, training within it. Like like we talked about compensatory acceleration. It was really fascinating because I realized that a lot of people couldn't understand it and didn't have the wherewithal or the inter and intermuscular coordination to make it happen. And then using some accommodating resistance was actually an excellent external marker into teaching them acceleration. So I wonder if we could get into a little bit of history and more importantly, how we can kind of drive and take this to the masses and the benefit of it.
Yeah. So here's where it started out from, at least for me, is, if you look back at some of the old Bud Charniga books that Lou was talking about, and specifically the training of the weightlifter that he had mentioned as the first one that he read. Well, there was speeds in there, right? It was M/S or MS superscript -1. And I had no idea what that meant, right? But I remembered it. And, whenever we were at Westside that day, when I've got that picture from, that's the first time that I think Lou had either the article on the Tendo would come out that month or it was getting ready to come out the next month. I'm like, dude, I know what to do with this. And then went back and applied it with the athletes at Southwest Missouri and Missouri State and then eventually University of Missouri, and found that the load velocity relationships were all pretty solid for the football team, the baseball team, and at SMS or basketball team. Now, if you've got a directional school, you're not going to have our center was 6'5". I don't mean center on the football team. I mean center on the basketball team was 6'5". So our basketball team was basically a football team, just the skill players on the football team, right? And the load velocity relationships were all within 0.06 or 0.08 meters per second per every, 60%, 70%, 80%. So I thought that we had something. And, my 21-year-old ass is thinking I'm the brightest thing that's ever walked the face of the earth at this point in time. I know everything because I'm 21. And I thought that, this must be it, that this is just solid. It's concrete. It won't change because it's worked for these different sports at 2 different universities, which, are an hour and a half, 2.5 hours apart. So, I mean, really it was more homogenous than heterogeneous, but I didn't know that back then but I wouldn't have listened to anybody anyways, because nobody could have told me anything. Yeah, I'm 21. You can't tell me shit. And then, here we go through and we find out some more stuff. We go through Mizzou and the zones pop up. And here's why the zones happened. Have you ever had, some people don't understand this, and here's where Dan and I really varied. There's 2 spots, but by Dan, I mean Dan Baker, the other VBT guy. Dan's rugby groups are pretty small, and it would be nothing for us to have 100, 120 people. You have the whole football team on there or the whole track team or something, and you're trying to work with a massive amount of people at the same time and have multiple different coaches. And, we had a coach on staff at one point whenever we're doing a lot of the VBT that you got to write for the lowest common denominator so that nothing gets majorly fucked up, right? Because, if you tell this person to stop, he keeps going because he doesn't understand the word stop. I mean, he was that dumb. My mom would say he's DUM dumb, right? That this individual. So we had to write everything for that. So we had to go with the means and just create those zones so nobody would mess it up. Now, the zones were perfect for squat and deadlift. They were off for bench press, but let's be honest, who gave two shits? John, have you ever seen anybody walk out of the tunnel on their hands?
No, and it's surprising. Nobody in my entire NFL career asked me what my bench press was on the field, like in between plays. Hey, what'd you bench? Never happened.
Nah, so we just rolled with the same speeds because why are we going to learn something different for something that doesn't matter? Mm-hmm. Why are you going to emphasize something that's unimportant? It just it befuddles me whenever somebody wants to go through that amount of precision and work for something that doesn't matter.
Well, that and also I never found my hand speed and the velocity for the upper body came from the bench press. It was actually it was all from the med ball work.
Yeah.
So it was, I mean, the squat and the deadlift I get, but it was actually all the med ball work and the throws and do like the whole med ball circuit that I did through my NFL career and picking up different balls at different weights. Sometimes it was heavy, some days it was lighter and fast.
Yeah.
That was actually much more beneficial for me in terms of hand speed than any bench press.
No, absolutely. I completely believe it because what is a hand punch? Well, that's an unloaded velocity into the spectrum. Yeah. How close can you get to an unloaded velocity into the spectrum on a bench? You can't, because you are going to, unless you're doing a bench throw, that's the only way that you would be able to do it. And I trust nobody. So I never did bench throws with my athletes because, I don't trust anyone. I've got this XPT rack that we're getting ready to make a couple of modifications on and try and do an EMG study for bench throws with the brake and without the brake. I've got one of my doc students who's going to be running that for me this summer. So we could potentially, I would, consider programming him now, but I mean, hand speed is velocity into the spectrum. You've got to train the velocity into the spectrum to improve it. Specific adaptations posed demands, but I didn't understand that back then either.
Yeah.
And then eventually,
well, it's because we weren't friends.
Yeah, right.
If we were friends, I could have asked you. Somebody always, people would be like, "Yeah, you have a big bench." I'm like, "Yeah, but the big bench is more about creating strength in the connective tissues for survival." The hand speed and the velocity stuff comes from the med ball throws, and especially all the transverse rotational med ball throws that I did. I think allowed me to avoid any back injury because the mechanism that I would see is guys would set this way and then they would get loaded here from the side and then hurt their backs. And so what I focused a lot on was transverse rotation catch, load, step, and just trying to basically mimic all the injury mechanisms that I saw, but then mimicking them with med balls and then being able to overload them. So if I did get hit from the side in a rotated position, it didn't affect me in the same ways.
And that's training the fascial sling systems quite well. That would be responsible for that, as on top of it. So, and that's something I didn't get whenever I was 21 either. And then the books came through as a result of people just asking me questions. Because matter of fact, I think it was Bert Soren sponsored something at the 2006 CSCCA, some roundtable thing, and I just started talking. And then a lot of people started asking me questions. And then I think the next year I gave a talk in a small room on it because everybody had so many questions based on what we were doing. And then I wrote the first book because I got tired of responding to emails. I guess I'm a bit of a dick sometimes, or just, slightly introverted to where it's like, I don't want to say the same thing over and over and over again. This annoys me. And so I wrote the book. And then I learned more. I wrote another book, and then I learned more. And then where are we on I have no idea what edition this is. Third, fourth, fifth. I got no fucking clue. But then, it's just the more that I learned, the more that I came into it. And of course, we've got the Olympic lifts have got different velocities because there's a different range of motion. And now I'm to the point where, God, I wish I wouldn't open my mouth so early. I think if I would have found this at 31 instead of 21, things would be different.
How
because
so?
Well, because so many people have taken it and put it in as gospel, and all they do is velocity stuff, and they don't train on the strength end, or they train inappropriately and they train with poor technique. where now I think that I use VBT. So here's how I use VBT today, right? I use it for speed, strength, and strength speed. And I use it for it's on the 4th edition text. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. 4th edition. Yeah. Good. I have no idea. And I also use it as a diagnostic to find what is the person poor at. And I actually have hijacked something that Jeremy Shepard did. Have you guys had him on the show before?
No, but we'd love to.
Yeah, dude. If you can make an introduction, we always are happy.
Yeah.
Anybody like you that recommends, we're happy to have them on in our striving thing to bring and put a spotlight on the best individuals in the world that don't just have the fucking best Instagram following.
Oh, yeah. I don't even know if he has an Instagram.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's our guy.
He's amazing.
Yeah. Somebody that nobody knows that all of a sudden becomes like the Keith Barr podcast where we have Keith. You know Keith Barr.
I have never met him. I'm familiar with his work. And one of these days I want to sit down and talk to him because I think there's a disconnect from some of the stuff that I'm saying and some of the stuff that he's saying. But I think that it's basically that he hasn't been in college. So like some of the stuff, like long story short, I know what his progressions are for the people who are more springy and tendinous dominant and what his, recommendations are for that. I have never had those time periods that he's mentioning. So my recommendations for those people that are springy, like that white French dude, that was the first. Now there's at least 2 white dudes that run sub 10, but that, whenever they started heavy strength training, he did really poorly.
Yeah.
And I get everything that he's saying, but my disagreement comes from the fact that if I got 5 weeks is all I got to train. Mm-hmm. I can't do 12 weeks of this and then follow it up with the heavy training and the ISOs and follow up the ballistics. So all I recommend for those individuals is let's progressively overload the ballistics.
Yeah.
But he's one of the people that I want to actually get his contact info from you guys or from Travis. And I want to get him while I'm still conference committee chair to get him to come speak at the NSCA National Conference next year.
No, so, he had some really great stuff about, for my shoulder rehab, the idea that, the worst thing you can do for a capsule is real tight compression. And actually, it was Kelly Starrett's Voodoo Floss. I was Voodoo flossing my shoulder trying to get it because I ended up, this is years ago, detaching my infraspinatus. And I started losing range of motion. And Kelly's like, hey, you got to do this, real tight wrap, Voodoo Floss, kind of work it through. So I was doing that. And all it did was it tightened the capsule and pretty much created this weird frozen, like something that presented like frozen shoulder, but only in the back. And it's something that I've been dealing with ever since. And I had Keith Barr on and we were talking about it. He's like, the single worst thing that you could do for your shoulder injury was compression. You need shear and you need load. So PNF and then somebody that'll fucking murder the tissues. And he's like, if you'd come to me, 10 years ago, you wouldn't have the shoulder injury that you have today. I mean, he had some really good stuff on that.
There's things that you learn after the fact. Hindsight's 2020. Holy shit, it's hindsight 2020.
I just hope one day we get a time machine where I can go back and find the early me and be like, don't fucking do this.
Well, here's the kicker. You wouldn't listen to him.
I would.
Who's this guy?
If I fucking showed up and I was like, hey, here's the deal. And I was searching enough. Oh, fuck, who knows? We probably wouldn't listen. All right, well, fuck all that. All right, so.
I want to take a pause and moment. You've mentioned two specific adaptations on and the velocity-based spectrum. Can we just take a second to give folks the specific adaptation spectrum of VBT and then head back in our direction?
Yeah. And I kind of don't even go over that a whole hell of a lot anymore because I think that people are majoring in minor. And honestly, that's where I was going with John, that I was like, man, if I had to do it all over again, I might not even open my mouth in the first place. Because so many people are like, well, I'm doing this for starting strength. They're like, dude, you don't even have strength. Why are you worrying about starting strength?
So this is where we get into this deal. I've been saying it since I did my very first CrossFit football seminar. Strength is the platform at which everything is built. Unless you're strong, none of this applies. And the other issue we run into, and especially with the VBT, and we've seen it with compensatory acceleration, we've also seen it with accommodating resistance. If you don't have enough training reps underneath your belt to effectively have perfected your technique, it's wasted. It's pointless. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I watch people, I'm VBT, we're working on this and this, and their technique is so bad that I'm like, dude, just the forcibly demo effect of what you're doing. You're just, it's like fucking cornering your car with loose lug nuts. I mean, it doesn't make sense. And so this is where we get into this. Like, there's a progression. Like, you have to be strong and you have to make sure your technique is dialed, or any of this work is wasted.
Yeah. Yeah. Matter of fact, talking about the strong first, that's actually here's a Louis Simmons story from 2003. Yeah, it was 2003. That so after one of the visits out there, I come back, and with the women's soccer and softball teams, I start doing speed press. Right. What happens for me doing speed press? Well, I expect their benches to go up. They don't go up. They don't move at all. And I call them up. I'm like, Lou, the speed press isn't working. What's going on? And he's like, well, here you doing it. I'm like, well, I'm doing it with the women's soccer team. Well, there's a problem. They're already weak. They're weaker than kittens. They got to get strong first before they can do anything like this. I mean, 40% of 300 pounds is 120 pounds. And if they're supposed to be doing 40 pounds of their max, and their max is 50, well, that's 20. That's less than the barbell. They're not strong enough to start doing it. That's what your problem is. And for those who have never heard Louis talk,
dude, it's pretty good.
It's pretty good for Lou, before it got near the end.
Yeah.
Whenever he would get wound up and excited, whenever he was talking in the gym, but if the only Louis Simmons voice they ever heard was the end, then that's, they don't get it. Yeah. But, so starting strength, which I really need to follow Verkhoshansky's model and just change the terminology. Because it's not understood appropriately. It should actually be starting speed, because this is the ability to rapidly overcome inertia and start fast. How fast can you go from jump? And is some of that going to be related to absolute strength for that first step? Absolutely. And that's the fucking point. You need to be strong before you do this stuff. And to just rapidly overcome inertia on that. So that's what it is. And that starting speed's typically around 15 to 40%. And then also, here's some things that people are talking about on the zones. Like, well, you're telling me that at 37%, I'm training starting strength, and at 41%, I'm training speed strength. No, you jackass. Everything's a continuum. Whenever you think it's a freaking door right there, that means
nothing exists in a vacuum. There. I mean,
no,
nothing is. I mean, it's like we used to get into this a little bit with reps, and it's either in Verkhoshansky, or it was in Zadaskorsky's Science and Practice, where he talked about myofibrillar versus sarcomplasmic hypertrophy.
It's both.
Yeah,
and SIF.
No, yeah. and SIF. So I mean, they got into this 1 to 3, 3 to 5, 5 to 7, and they kind of gave rep ranges for what they believed were like developing different fiber types of muscle, not realizing that it's not like, well, I did 4, I'm training myofibrillar. Oh no, you did 5, now you're sarcomplasmic. I'm like, dude, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. This thing's an accumulation. I mean, there's, dudes that have done singles, doubles, and triples that have put on massive amounts of fucking sarcomplasmic hypertrophy. And there's dudes that have done 8s that, so it's like, there's so many extraneous factors that are playing into this, that to just look at it and say, oh, cut and dry, it doesn't exist. And we're talking about human organisms and millions of different, opportunities for this.
And the way that fibers happen, and the different, and all the different adaptations that occur in training. I mean, holy cow.
Think about age. You think about age, location, diet, intent. I mean, environment, there's too many factors.
100%. And then from there, after the speed strength, we really get into the two sides to peak power. And this is the other aspect where Dan and I vary. Dan likes to train at peak power. I don't. I like to train either slightly to the force side or slightly to the speed side. I want to kind of overload power from one aspect. And that's, who's right? Me, because, I'm arrogant. But no, actually, we don't know. This is just the variance. I train over or under with strength speed and speed strength. Strength speed's a little bit more towards the velocity. Load end of the spectrum. Speed strength's a little bit more towards the velocity end of the spectrum, right? Then after that, you've got accelerative strength, which isn't accelerating down a track. It's, 60 to 80%. It's heavy, but it's still, you can still move it kind of fast, and you can still, and the great thing about it is once you cross 60%, that's whenever you start spending a lot more of your time in acceleration rather than deceleration. Yeah. And once you hit that 80%, I think you're something like 90% plus of your time is spent in acceleration, which is great, right? And that's, going back to Fred and even Dr. Mike Stone, who's like, you can't lift a heavyweight slow. They're absolutely right. If you slow down on a heavy load, you're going to fall back down. But at the same time, you can also slow down the way that the rate coding works for truly high velocity movements, because we get back into specificity. Then, of course, over 80% is going to be absolute strength, like I had mentioned. And, whenever you get down to it, if I told you that, hey, if we're training 5 reps and heavier, you're training strength. Okay. But if we're doing 5 reps and we lighten the load on it, you're doing speed, and nobody's going to be arguing there. And that's essentially what I've done with VBT is let's just, relate everything back and overlap the things. And that's where the truth lies. And that's something that Buddy Morris told me. Yeah. Cause I remember it was actually on that same freaking visit. So what had happened was Rick Perry, now he's an assistant at Northwestern, used to be with the Bears, before that Central Michigan, before that Notre Dame, before that SMS, where he became my mentor. And actually before that, he worked for Fred Roll at Kansas. Well, so we had gone over to visit Buddy and Thomas Linsky, who is another person. I don't know if you'd be able to get Milo on a podcast or not. And he is anti-social media as you can get, but he is honestly, if there's somebody that it was going to be replacing Louis, I think it should be Milo, because he's that dude. But so I'm sitting there visiting with him, and then Rob Phillips was actually at the Browns at that time too. And when I had the opportunity to talk to Buddy, because I was so frustrated, I'm like, man, this person's saying this person's saying that, Thibodeau's saying this, which is kind of funny. I'm going to see Christian Thibodeau in a couple of weeks. I've never met him before, but I was like, okay, Thibodeau is saying this, Zatsiorsky says this, Sif says this, Kerr says
Are
this.
you putting Christian Thibodeau in the Zataskorsky, Verkhoshansky category?
No, fuck no.
Oh,
I'm not.
No.
It was just like,
I was a little nervous. I'm like,
book.
I don't put Teabag Nation fucking anywhere near the Grail, especially Christian Thibodeau and his fucking nonsense.
No, it's just I happen to be remembering reading that book and visiting Louis a week after. I believe it was the Black Book of Training Secrets. But I was just going back and like looking at all these books. I'm like, these people are saying these things. Who's right? And Buddy goes, it's the overlap. You don't know who is right. They're right based on their perspective and based off of their context. But in the overlap is where we find the truth. And that's, that's all I did is, hey, let's overlay the percentages of 1RM, the repetitions, and training with maximal intent.
Yeah.
And let's see where do these adaptations occur at. And there's a solid load velocity relationship over 60%.
Dude,
bam, done.
The piece that gets lost, and I hope the listeners if they can take one thing from this podcast, is intent. And I think which is interesting is when you start saying, hey, we're going to do 5 reps, you're going to do 5 reps at, let's say 90%, 80%, 70%, 60%. So let's pick different loads over different days, keep the reps the same. You have to move the bar with 100% max intent and intensity, regardless of what the percentage is. So obviously, and this is, we see this all the time. And this is where I had the huge fucking, basically just like couldn't wrap my head around a single thing Charles Poliquin ever fucking talked about when he started talking about timed concentric movements. Like, I can get if you want to like, hey, like let's slow down the eccentric phase. And, I know that to speed up the accentuation phase, you have to speed up the eccentrics. I mean, we got that from Fred Hatfield. But like I can understand that, if you want to slow down the eccentrics and, have a smooth accentuation phase, let's say on a squat, for example, because you're trying to drive more muscle. But I can't ever get away from once you turn the switch and you go back to the concentric, you move from point A to point B as fast as you can. And that was always how we trained. All of a sudden I'm listening to him and he's like, 3-second concentric movements. And at that point I'm like, fuck, dude, I have zero input on this and this is null and void to me. And so what's interesting a lot of times is what people don't understand is regardless of the load that you pick, you have to move it from point A to point B as violently as possible, and you let load dictate speed.
100%. That's all I'm ever saying.
And that is fucking lost on 99% of the world, especially in the strength training model. Like you have to do, and the other one, like Arnold made a great point in pumping iron when they were like, oh, what rep range to put on muscle? And he was like, the next one. If I can do 8, it's got to be 9. If I can do 9, it's got to be 10. Well, yeah, it's mechanical failure. You have to literally push to the next rep to try to drive muscle. Same with speed. You have to have maximal intent. And that I feel like every time I listen to anything on VBT, if people could just take that one nugget away, it would fix 99% of these questions.
Dude, and here's the one that it's like, no matter what, VBT is always going to work. And here's why. There's a study from Randall. And, you've probably heard me talk about this before. I don't know if I've talked about it on the podcast because that was 200 episodes ago and many bottles of rum. But so this guy named Randall and Nick Gill and John Cronin are on there. And, Nick Gill, strength coach for the New Zealand All Blacks. Well, they took some of the, I call it like, I don't know, minor league rugby. It's their farm club, basically, for the All Blacks. And they had the groups do the exact same percentages of 1RM, the exact same sets, reps, rest intervals, and everything. And only one thing varied on their jump squats, right? On their jump squats, which was 3x4 or 4x3 or something like that, twice a week. No, it's 3x3, 9 repetitions twice a week, 18 reps total of, I think I figured out that there's 275 reps in there. So we're talking about less than 10% of the program varied by only receiving the feedback of the velocity. There was no difference in the program. One group got feedback on 18 reps. The other group did not get the feedback on 18 reps. The group that got the feedback on those 18 reps saw better improvements in speed, better improvements in jumping ability, both vertically and horizontally. And as far as strength goes, I don't remember if there was a difference in the outcomes of strength. But I mean, at the end of the day, for me, who cares? It's strength training is an ends to a means. It is what I'm using to enhance speed and power. So if speed and power improve, that's all that matters. But it was a significant improvement over the group that did not receive the feedback. That's it, man. If you can just drive intent, that's the only thing that matters. Load velocity relationships and everything, that's cool. That's step 2. Step 1 is drive intent. Step 2 is is to start, maybe if you wanted to do some zones and stuff. Then step 3 is load velocity and force velocity profiling to individualize your programs. And that's really it in a nutshell. I mean, you could either, I just saved you however much the book is. $35 or whatever, $25. I have no idea how much.
Well, we're still going to recommend people buy the book because there's great information. But like I remember it was the first time that I ever spoke to Fred Hatfield. I called him on the phone. I reached out because we were in the middle of this is in the infancy when we were testing Field Strong. We had like a big kind of training deal, went through this big training cycle, and we were actually using Compex EMS devices. So, I was a big EMS guy because I found it through Charlie Francis. And I remember it was 2000. I talked on the phone to Charlie and he recommends the EMS because I was trying to get my patellar tendon to work. And we started getting into sprint percentages. Like the only way you learn to run fast is by running fast. Running slower than 92% was in a no man's land. And then he made a really interesting point when he said, where's the majority of strength built? Between 70 and 90%. But yet for sprinting, that's the no man's land. And I was, I'm fucking 23 and I'm like, oh, okay, what are you trying to tell me? He said, speed is not, or like strength is not the limiting factor for speed. If it was, people get stronger, some people run faster when they get stronger. For most people, strength is not the missing element. And, and he called it the no man's land, but it was, I'm jumping around a bunch. But we did this deal for Field Strong where we were actually reached out to by Compex and they want us to test the EMS devices. So we had about 800 people in the program.
Shit.
And I think we had about 150, 200 people that had actually bought the Compexes. And then I wrote the programming based off of the stuff that Charlie had sent me years ago. Hey, this is how we're going to do it because I know that these different frequencies tap into these different muscle fibers. And then I had, if you were below 40, you would do it after. If you were above 40, you'd do it before. We did a bunch of jumps and it was this whole training cycle. And I thought that we were going to come out the other side of this thing with this fucking amazing model to train individuals. And I just get to the end and there was no single correlation in with any of it. I mean, certain guys crushed it, other guys didn't. And so I asked for feedback and to send me the videos. And what was interesting was that the guys that did well, everybody moved pretty fast on everything. And there was a ton of guys that moved really slow. And then that's when I got into actually talking to people about compensatory acceleration, because I realized I had left that out of all of my coaching stuff with CrossFit football in the early days. And I can
add some context here. So this is 2014, and we were offering so we had CrossFit football, and then we're offering Field Strong alone, none of the jack streets or grindstones that we have. So it was a leveled up option that people had a more dense or comprehensive is a better word, strength and conditioning program. And we were writing it as if college team, but we didn't have the video option that Train Heroic has now. So once we did test and get the videos, then it compensatory acceleration was assumed and taught at the seminars, but translated to the masses.
Challenge. So we would discuss it, but I didn't beat it like we talk about now. And so I did this, the only thing I could, I reached out to Fred Hatfield and said, hey, I used to train in Zengis' garage. He talked about you. And then the interesting thing was he reached back out, comes to find out that Zengis had fucked him on some money, or there was a bunch of old stuff. And then he was also mad at George because George was supposed to pay him for when he squatted 1,000 pounds in his suit, and then George fucked him on some money, and then the suit ripped him to pieces, and he was, so there was all this I just want to talk about compensatory acceleration. So we had a great fucking conversation, and he got into all of the history of compensatory acceleration, how he did it, how his training was, compensatory acceleration, the torquemeter, the percentages that he was using, and that he, basically was able to move 800 plus pounds at a certain meters per second. And then that translated to a 1,200. So he got into all this beautiful mind shit. And it was at that point we went back and I realized, unless we harp on intent, most people aren't inherently going to know to do it.
No, 100%. You know what? One thing that was popping up into my head whenever you were talking about this, you got those numbers from Charlie for the Compex, right? So Charlie's working with sprinters. So what we also have to take into account is that some of the mistakes that I made on homo versus heterogeneity. So who's going to be sprinters? Well, their nervous system is going to be firing at a certain rate. And for for somebody who's 2A and 2X, the nervous system is going to be firing faster than somebody who is typically a type 1 to a 2C, and maybe with some decent 2A in there. So then, if you are throwing in so if the rate coding, so the level of speed, the intent with which that signal is going down isn't matching what their fiber type is, you might not have seen results. But I bet your fast guys saw the results and everybody else didn't.
Well, we took that into account. We actually did a Hatfield muscle fiber test where we had them take max reps at a certain percentage.
Like 80%?
Yeah, for max reps, which was just an easy way. And then there was actually different protocols recommended based on who you are, because I realized, and this was something that I told Compex, and I've been telling these guys for years, is that everybody just wants to go to the number one setting. Like they want to go to the max intensity or the max velocity or the max frequency. The problem, and I would always ask, is how much of that high-end fiber type do you have to necessarily work with? If you did, you would either be a high-level sprinter or get a chance to play in the NFL. So I had a whole prereq for this, like who are you? What have you done for your training? And I found that for the majority of the people, somewhere in that, I think it was like 80 to 105, 110 hertz, which is really hitting the fiber type that we're looking for, with not those type 2X. Was where the most people. So I actually dictated, hey, this is like 80% of your block of the Compex EMS device work should be in this range, unless you're have a 40-inch vertical or got a chance to play a decade in the NFL.
Right. Yeah. No, 100%. So good.
But Charlie and I talked about that at great length, where he was like, because the unit that I bought just had like 2 frequencies. And the frequencies were like top register and then a snatch below. So he talked about, we'll know whether or not this works really quickly if you have the muscle fiber makeup for it to work. So I ended up getting the device and it worked fucking within 3 weeks. My leg was firing. And he was like, awesome. Good. That's good for you. If you didn't have that fiber, it wouldn't work for you. because the
then you wouldn't be in the NFL. So
well, but also the machines that the Compacts and also the Power Dots later on had this huge range of different frequencies that they could hit.
Yeah.
The ghetto ass machines we had only had 1 or 2 frequencies.
Yeah. Well, if it's all you need is 1 or 2, then you can't worry about fucking it up by going too fast. Try and go to that, that intent, that max intensity. Excuse me. But something popped into my head here that you gave Fred's last recorded video, right? You did the last recording with him, and now you did it with Lou.
Yeah,
that's quite a badge of honor to to have been the last recording with. I mean, I don't think GOAT is a strong enough word. Icon or historic. I don't know.
I just got goosebumps, chills. I completely unintentional. Like Fred Hatfield was teaching a seminar down in Houston. And so we drove down, he reached out to us and said, "Hey, I'm teaching. I don't teach that much anymore. Would you guys come down?" So we packed up the truck and, I can't remember if it was Luke or whoever was like, we should go down and do a Talk to Me, Johnny on the long road. This is pre-podcast. What we used to do is, bring people in and I would just have these kind of long form kind of podcasts. We call it the long road. So we went down there and got to hang out in his hotel room and talk to him and answer all these questions. And then we went to the seminar and he gave a incredible Fred Hatfield, talk, and then ended up passing away
shortly
thereafter. And then we had been meaning to go do Lou for a podcast for years. And it was actually when you texted me, "Hey, Lou's struggling a little bit. Can you think we could reach out to Dr. Tom about him?" I think I said the text like, "We got to fucking go." And then we got asked to speak at the Arnold education piece. And it just kind of linked up that way. And then I reached out to Tom and, "Hey, Lou's not going to do any more podcasts. He doesn't feel good." And then Tom reached back and said, "Hey, Lou won't do a podcast, but he said he'll do yours." He said, "You're about the only person in the world that he's willing to do one with."
Man. Yeah, I'm so glad you got that, man. Yeah, I had to stop it and cry a couple of times. I'm not going to lie, hearing his voice and after the fact. As a matter of fact, I'm not going to say where I was, but whenever I landed, I was on something that was very, very important for me to be on for, and that's whenever I got the text that he went. And there's my wife is like, "What was it about this guy?" Because I've lost a lot of people, and outside of my grandparents, nobody hit me like Lou. And some of it's the regret because I didn't. One, it took me, I think, 4 or 5 days to hit you with that text about Inky, and I'm like, if I would have called 4 or 5 days earlier, would that have changed anything? And and then on top of that, it's all the impact that he did for me for my career. And I don't know if I actually got the chance to ever fully express that to him. And, because there would be no Brian Mann if there weren't Louis Simmons. Let's just be honest. Yeah, it was the training that I did while I was there, the guidance that I got while I was there. While some people fold under the, "Come on, you stupid son of a bitch, go! Can't you do that?" I thrived under it. So, and I completely get some people's problems with Lou, but that's also what endeared me to him. That he was just him 100%, and he was an asshole, but he was, it's like Patton, right? He was an asshole, but he was our asshole, and we loved him. And that's how I feel about Lou. But that's, I'm so happy that you guys got to do that. If for no other reason than my personal, being able to hear that, hear his voice again one more time, hear his thoughts, and that whole thing about, the young man is set in his ways, and, and those thoughts from him, and hearing some of the things about him threatening his nerves. I don't know if he talked about it on your podcast or if I heard about it from somebody else, but I guess the day before he went, he thought he was getting, you know what, I better not say this because that's not, if it wasn't already public, I'd hate to do that, but I'll say it offline.
Yeah, no, he was all excited. He had just got a way bigger pulley on his Hellcat, and he thought he was going to make like 750, 800 at the rear wheel. And he was like so excited to basically get in this thing. And he's like, because he lived 3 miles from the gym. And so he would try to get like he was doing like 120 on those streets. Just so the guys were like,
those aren't streets to do 120 miles an hour on. I know.
So Tom told us a story. He's like, has Lou told you about his Hellcat? He's like, we went for like nobody will ride with him because he's just fucking brick on the accelerator, just Mach 1. And he's like, it's fast. He's like, he
scared the shit out of me driving his Escalade. I can only imagine what it would have been like in that thing.
I just thought he was hoping that like a bus pulls out in front of him and he goes out in a fiery wreck. I mean, I always kind of, this is a terrible thought, but I thought when Louis, as we were sitting there,
you and I talked about it. If you're going where I think you're going.
Yeah. I mean, I like when we were sitting there and all I could hope was if he passes away, we just walk him out into the parking lot. We basically burn him on pallets, like a Viking thing, like fucking shoot an arrow with the flame and just send him up. It's really how he would want to go.
That's I said 100% the same thing. And then I reached out to Doris to find out, I'm like, fuck it. We might be able to make this happen. And I'm like, come on, if he's going to be cremated anyways.
We could just burn him in the parking lot. God damn it, dude.
Didn't happen.
Can you imagine the fucking, the explosion on the internet? Like a bunch of fucking big ass dudes.
For me, it would have been worth it. The jail time, we probably would have been sentenced to some local misdemeanor or whatever. It might have been a felony. I don't know.
We have we don't have I basically fucking canceled DirecTV because some stupid shit. So we have Netflix. And so we've been trying to like find like shows to watch, and I got really stuck on these like different like historical kind of deal. And there was one called The Last Kingdom, which is about like around the 800s, and it's about the Saxons and the Anglos and like the Danes coming in. And so my family is from Denmark, and then I also have family from England. So it was kind of historically, and it's fucking a badass show. It's got this dude Uhtred and The Last Kingdom. But in it, like the Vikings, which, that's where my family is from. So I'm watching with my daughters. And like when the Vikings die, they fucking burn them. Like they have these huge processions and they put them on, Viking ships and send them out and shoot arrows and fucking burn them up. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, what a fucking great way to go.
Yeah.
And all I can think of is like, if anybody deserved a Viking burial, it was Louis.
It was 100%. Yeah, you and I independently thought of that. And I was like, I didn't want to be the one to say it first because I'm like, hey, I'm crazy. No, nobody would actually do this. And whenever you said it, I'm like, I'm not as crazy as I thought. Let's do it.
Dude, he and then he didn't want to have any service, because I asked him, I'm like, hey, he's like, when I die, it's over. Just fucking sweep me underneath the carpet. And I know that was his final wish, but it would have been. What are you going to have fucking Dave Tate and those guys get up and tear up and, talk about him and, fuck. I mean, he probably didn't.
And how many people that have talked shit about him for 30 years are going to try and act like they're his friend at that point? And that's exactly. Yeah.
And that's not what he wants.
No, Louis doesn't want people talking good about him when he was alive, let alone when he's dead. He didn't know how to handle it. I don't either. So, I do a lot better whenever people are hating me than I do whenever people are telling me I'm doing a good job. That's for sure.
Well, I think if everybody thinks you're doing a good job, you're obviously not making much of a mark of improvement. Like you got to have some fucking haters, right?
Yeah. I've got some good haters. So, and that's all right.
Let's dig into that one a little bit. I mean, what would necessarily somebody attack? I mean, is the idea that they don't think that there's value in velocity-based training, or that the way that you're doing it isn't appropriate, or that, if finding different ways to overcome inertia, isn't necessarily a real thing?
You know what? There's a little bit of all of it. So then there's some people who think that the only thing I say is to lift light weights fast, and that's all you need to do. And to that, I respond, did you see the other books I've written on how to get super strong in this book called Powerlifting? That's fucking stupid. Then there's the people who are like, there's a lack of precision because I like to use zones. Okay. All right, cool. You're right. There is a lack of precision. But you go ahead and try and implement your methodology in a team environment. There's a reason why they gravitated towards mine and not yours, because yours is fucking impossible unless you have, one-on-one training environment, which is very well maybe what they came from. Then there's some with that there is no value in training by velocity. It's completely misguided. And, that's some of that's coming from biomechanists. And I think that, the problem sometimes is that, or engineers rather. And the problem is, I think sometimes that, you ask an engineer what time it is, they're going to tell you how the watch is built. So I think that amount of over-analysis comes from that. And then some value is that some things is they just don't fucking like me because I'm fat or whatever. I don't know what it is, but I think that just sometimes whenever you've been doing it for a while and you make a name for yourself doing something, you get a target on your back and people got to shoot arrows with whatever they can to try and get themselves attention. Even people who choose to use terms that I have coined as their own fucking handle, yet they want to come and say that, no, Pete, that this isn't right. You got to listen to the way I'm doing it. Motherfucker, you done this for 6 months and you want to call yourself that? However, I've been doing this 22 years. Well, and
in observation at the NSCA conferences, this is with Man and Dietz, just sitting on these presentations, and there's oftentimes for Q&A. So you guys are intelligent to leave time for Q&A because these guys stand up and try to battle, and then you just...
Is this the way that they're trying to effectively make a name for themselves to feel that they can somehow...
That's what I feel, because it's different cities, different conferences, and I still see these guys try to battle on stage, like with the microphone.
So this is a hard thing for me. I mean, like the conversation for velocity-based training is an easy one for me because it was so fundamental, even though we didn't necessarily call it what it was and there was no zones. Yeah. But, at the end of the day, like understanding this progression, especially within my own, but obviously, I mean, shit, dude. Like if we were to, I think we calculated a couple of years ago, we've delivered something over 3.5 million workouts to something like 75,000 or 100,000 athletes. We've launched, we've provided daily programming for over 14 years.
Yeah.
Damn.
And 1,500 online students through the methodology.
Yeah. So, I mean,
and 300 seminars.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Taught 300 seminars around the globe, certified coaches, the amount of people that we've worked with. I mean, dude, the first day CrossFit Football launch, we had 16,000 hits. I mean, we consistently had tens of thousands of people following this program. And then it wasn't until we went to the paid model because I couldn't get people to leave enough feedback. So I ended up charging $20 is how, and then once people logged into that, then I could start getting all the feedback. I mean, we ran, 750 people through a daily workout training matrix and was able to get that information on the backside. I mean, through Train Heroic, there's, thousands of people around the globe a day checking multiple programs and have basically offered uninterrupted program every single day, if not one up to 14 for 14 plus years. I mean, you're talking about millions of workouts to hundreds of thousands of athletes. And there's only, and so when you start looking at that many data points, there's only a few things that are true. One is strength is the platform on which all life is built. Stronger people generally do better at what they are. And then when you hear intelligent people like yourself talk about velocity base, it's easy to take it on and be like, wow, this is really good information. Or hear Cal Dietz talk about his triphasic and think, shit, man, I'd never thought about training different muscle contractions at their end range in different points. Like it was so interesting when we heard the triphasic talk. And I was like, dude, we've done pieces of this in every part of our training cycle, but never actually arranged it this way. And I was like, man, this is some beautiful mind stuff. And it's easy to incorporate because we've already done it. We've already done isometrics. We're already doing these things. Yeah. Now here's a real easy system. And then, using, Jesus. I mean, dude, I've been doing some form of PAP training since 1996, with Todd Rice. I mean, he started talking about post-activation potentiation training in 1996. And I've used that element, and then here, hey, let's throw another one in with French contrast. I mean, these are all things like it's intelligent conversations. And you're like, if you have the framework to work from, oh, we did this. Now here's a tweak. Let's try it this way. And so I think a lot of the problem at times is that people haven't done the work on the front side to be able to have these intelligent conversations and to sit back and be like, holy shit, this is really smart. Maybe I could learn something here.
No. And a lot of times I think all they're wanting to do is have some controversial statement so then they get more Instagram followers.
Or just have a real cool handle because they don't have the balls to put their fucking name in there.
Yeah. That too. Yeah. It's nuts, man.
Well, it's impactful and it's cool. I mean, if I keep going back to this thing. I mean, like we really talk about velocity-based training and using these things in kind of the intermediate athlete. Is there like a maturation phase in terms of the beginner? I mean, obviously we talked about strength and developing their technique and excellence and that idea before they move on. But are the things that the novice athlete, the beginner, the amateur could start incorporating in that transition phase?
I mean, you're actually, most of the time people are, right? Because they're usually doing some sort of Olympic weightlifting derivative while they're training strength, right? So then you get the velocity of the spectrum and you get the force of the spectrum. So really, a lot of people say they don't do concurrent periodization are out of their mind. But no, there's some aspects to it. And really here's how we at Missouri got our heads together and decided to progress the athletes is I bastardized, for lack of a better term, Zatsiorsky's explosive strength deficit because we didn't have force plates. What did we have? Equations, right, within Excel. And, there was basically you had a rate limited number for the numerator, a non-rate limited number for the denominator. And then that's what gave you your explosive strength deficit. So I was thinking, rate limited, counter movement jump, I can convert that to power, right, to account for body weight. So let's put power in the numerator. And then what's the denominator? Well, the closest thing that we get to the true strength side was their squat max. Well, their squat max and their body weight matters. And so I just added squat. So I divided their counter movement jump power by their squat and their deadlift. And I called it the power strength ratio because that's all it fucking is. It's power strength ratio. I mean, it's not an explosive strength deficit because I don't have anything actually measured. I'm just estimating all these things. And we would look at a couple of things. We would look at I standardized the scores then, and I did it by position. I could have gone back and allometric. Whenever I went back and allometrically scaled everything, it came out to be pretty close. But I broke it up between bigs, mids, and skills. And whenever somebody came out of whack on their standard deviation, that's whenever we would start adding the next level of velocity in. So, if they were too strong for how explosive they were, that ended up being like negative. I mean, technically it was -1. If it was a player, if it was a dude, I wouldn't let him get that low, right? We would start the velocity emphasis sooner. And that kept their power increasing. And to me, that was what it was all about. And I didn't know this at the time. I should have, because there's it's an early 80s paper from Fry and Kramer. I might go ahead and be text right now and look up college football success, power, Fry, Kramer. Let's see what year that paper came out. No, this isn't it. It came out whenever Andy Fry was a doc student. I'll go find it later and send it to Tex so that we can look at these old papers and get all excited about them. But long story short, the only thing that they found mattered for being able to be a good program or not. So what everybody did was they just sent them their program, right, their profile, and they calculated power. They looked at some other things. They could differentiate who was in the top 25 by who wasn't by counter movement jump power. I believe they used the Hartman equation for it. And they couldn't differentiate between they couldn't rank, like the number 1 team was higher than the number 2 team, than the 3 team or whatever. But if you were in the top 25, you had significantly higher power than you did for those who were not. And it worked out that way by level, by Division II, Division I, and I think NAIA at that time. So it just like, hey, power is what matters. And at the end of the day, that's it. And I kind of was getting to that point near the end of my career at Mizzou. It's like everything we do is to enhance power. And now where I'm at is, okay, everything we do is to enhance power and make it happen more rapidly. So move peak power to the left on the force time continuum, because that also goes in with that, you've got a limited amount of time to produce force in an athletic activity. This isn't a weight room. It's not that, you can't do the Mark Bell 90-second bench press that he did way back in the day. I think it literally took a minute and a half for it to touch his chest and then for him to get the press. If you guys are in tight with him, you could ask him and find that one out. A funny story about Mark Bell. His old training partner, Doc Dave from Westside, was my training partner for 7 years, one of my best friends. And and that dude, actually, Dave, is probably one of the world's smartest individuals. He's a leading researcher internationally on autism for both the treatment and for the factors going into its development.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I forgot where I was going. Yeah.
Well, we were talking about development and really just how
Yeah. And so now I'm trying to move that peak power to the left. So it's all about power, and it's about when power can be applied. And power is the intersection of force and velocity. So both matter, and that's one of the things I don't think people get.
I mean,
fiber type absolutely matters, but that's going to be a lot of a result of, one, genetics, and two, the type of training that's been done, because the fiber types shift all the time as a response to training.
I remember Louis, this is a conversation I had at Westside when we were training, because we were talking about Prilipin's table, and he's like, these guys, it was like Tony Baloney and Luke and fucking those other big strong dudes. He was like, they're only going to need between 4 and 5 reps at their max. You might need 10. And I asked him, what dictates the number? And he was pretty forthright when he's like, testosterone. The more drugs, the higher the testosterone, the more efficient the nervous system. That there's a direct relationship between androgen profile and nervous system efficiency. So the more drugs they take, the more efficient they are, the less reps they need. So that would mean that the non-drugged athlete or the non-enhanced athlete is going to need more reps because they don't have as efficient a nervous system. And
Bill Gillespie said the same thing.
So he's like, he goes, there's this kind of interesting misconception that the enhanced athlete can handle more volume, which is untrue. That's the reason that all the guys on the drugs get hurt, because the drugs allow their nervous system to be so efficient that they're able to get more out of less. Whereas if you're a enhanced athlete, you're going to need more. And so that was a really interesting piece for me, because we went home and we had both guys and girls. We were training a bunch of girls in our groups. And so when we did the Hatfield muscle fiber test, we basically had everybody. We had a girl who I think she was a triple jumper at San Luis Obispo. She was probably 137, 140 pounds. She had a legit 280 back squat. So, like double body weight, so no issue. We cut her back to 80%. She did 29 reps at 80%.
Not surprised. The females tend to be more type 1 than type 2. The males, and their peak power hits at the low end of the spectrum as opposed to the velocity end of the spectrum, which then that kind of makes sense with what Lou's saying, because what's the difference? Fucking testosterone.
Yeah, the only place that they're producing testosterone is in their adrenals, which is 10% of what's in the testes. So, and then when I called it back, asked him, he said, of course, women are always going to be able to handle a higher percentage of 1RM for more reps. We've seen that universally with the women we've tested until they take drugs, and then they become like the men.
That's an interesting study that I would never be able to do. I couldn't get that to go through an institutional review board.
No, we couldn't. But what's fucking amazing about Lou is Lou had the ability to observe. And when I asked him a little bit about, he was shit. I still remember we were sitting in, it was the morning group, and it was fucking literally like Ice Cube. And I still remember him looking over at me, and it was the line that Ice Cube, and I can't remember the song, but it was like, I started this motherfucking gangster shit, and this is the motherfucking thanks I get. And I looked over, and Louis fucking literally was, doing his little dance, and he fucking hit that perfectly. And I'm like, man, ain't that the truth? Yeah. And, it was, but there were things that happened there that he was able to observe because he knew that nobody could ever test. And that's the fucking intrinsic knowledge that we've lost, because when I asked him a little bit about that, he was like, well, no university's going to test that one, but I'm telling you what I've seen.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's what we get with the Louis, the Bondarchuks, all those guys that, there was so much observation. Bondarchuk obviously took data and included that, but we're losing, we lost it. And it's a damn shame for anybody who wouldn't swallow their pride and go see Lou, because of whatever problem that they thought they had with the individual.
You think there are a lot of people that have regret that they didn't patch it up with Lou at the end?
I think that the people that, if it were me, I would. I have regret about waiting for a couple of days on a phone call. I mean, let's be honest, there's no fucking way that would have mattered. But for some people I know that there's some people that are out there that are so small-minded and so have such issues. And dude, I want to say this. I want to say it this way because I think this is the best way for me to get it across. Powerlifting is a sport where a bunch of people end up going to try and for self-preservation of their own mental state. Powerlifting isn't what people often go to because they have got the greatest mental health. This is an outlet for them to deal with their stresses and other things. And if somebody is mentally ill, they are not going to be able to process information. They are going to take something and take it personal whenever nothing was personal. And those individuals, I think, they would probably come and dance on his grave. I think that the individuals that were more even keeled and balanced, if they left without things getting too, Lou did get personal with a few people. Yeah. Right? I know that, right? And that's different. I'd say for 90% of the population, the people that if they didn't have regret, it was probably one of their own issues. That's how I should put it. But I was going down the mental health aspect of it because of how many of my friends from Westside and elsewhere involved in powerlifting, when they had that outlet of stress removed from them, that they were using to keep themselves from addiction and keep themselves on the straight and narrow, they were unable to deal with life and they ended it all. And that's why in the new powerlifting book, I had included such a long section on mental health and getting it taken care of because, exercise is a Band-Aid for mental health. Yes, exercise is required for stress and everything else, but whenever you start going to the extremes, it's a Band-Aid for mental health rather than approaching it. And if anybody is mentally ill, they are going to not do well with, holy shit, my wife just sent me 5 text messages. Let me make sure everything's okay. All right, never mind. Everything's okay. Let's order stuff that they don't, they're not going to be able to get through it. Right. And that's why I included it. I'm like, guys, we got a suicide issue here. We need to address this.
Well, shit. And look at all the bodybuilders that are passing away. I mean, shit, dude. Like that's an interesting piece in that community. But then you have suicide. I mean, if I always thought if it was, because the minute any of these bodybuilders pass away, like, oh, it's steroids. I'm like, first of all, the powerlifters probably take more drugs than the bodybuilders. So, and those guys aren't dying. Those guys aren't dying the same way. They're actually killing themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a shame. And so many close friends who have succumbed to it, that's what led to that. It actually, with human kinetics, they said no at first. So I told them, I'll leave his name out because I don't know, if it would matter or if it would bring up stuff to him. But I threw my pen on the paper on the table. I'm like, look, this is included or you're finding a new author. And so it's, I've got the first strength sport psych section. I've got the first strength sport mental health section. And I guess if there's anything that I'm proud about in my career, that's probably going to be it. All I want to do is make a difference. Some people want to be famous, insta famous, whatever. Nah, man, if you need to be the change you wish to see in the world. Mahatma Gandhi had that down years ago. And I know Mahatma Gandhi is not without faults, right? I understand about the 14-year-olds and shit like that, but I still think that's
look at Martin Luther King. I mean, Martin Luther King.
Man, every single person here is human. And that's another thing that I have a problem with people sometimes putting me up on the pedestal and why I'm so uncomfortable with it. It's like, dude, I'm probably the most flawed human that there is. So, don't put me on a pedestal because you're going to be extremely disappointed whenever you find out that I'm nowhere near what you think I am. So, yeah, and that's one of the, I guess I've got imposter syndrome. Maybe that's what it would be called. But, yeah, I want to go do what I do. Just, don't put me up on a pedestal, And I think Lou had some of that too. And he felt uncomfortable about people, blowing him up in a good manner as well. I'm not sure if that's what it was. I never got to talk to him about it, but I have been talking with some religious leaders about it, because I'm like, well, how do you handle this? How do you handle this? People putting you up on a pedestal and thinking that you know everything. And I didn't intend on going into this in this podcast, but here we are having a therapy session. But that's just what it is. We've got to find ways to deal with it and improve our own mental health. So then the next generation isn't going to have that same problem.
Well, I really think the issue comes down to being genuine or disingenuous.
I'll do.
This is something that I have seen throughout my life, whether it be in professional sports or this. I have a very hard time. Like, I'll just give you a little example. There was a Instagram picture of a dude who was up there, posting shirtless pictures. The guy's in great shape, and he's up there, DM me for nutrition and training advice, and the guy has terrible gynecomastia.
Well, I forgot to say drug advice with PCT, so you don't get gyno too.
I mean, to the point where like uncomfortable, like I'm fucking can't even look at it, and and then goes through this whole diatribe of this, and then DM me for training and nutrition advice, and he's posting these shirtless pictures. Like, it just, not to say the guy hasn't done the hard work, but it just it just doesn't gel for me. And I think all too often, this was something very disingenuous within the NFL, where you see a guy, stand up and go to Bible study in here, and all of a sudden he's a guy that gets arrested with hookers in the car or drugs. So I have no problem if that's the life you want to lead, but just be honest.
100%.
The issue I run into is just with disingenuous, where it's fucking, it just, hey, if you want to be a piece of shit, or you want to do this, or you want to live your life in extremes, it's fine. And that's what I really liked about Lou, is that he made no excuses. He wasn't a fucking choir boy. West Side wasn't for everybody.
No,
he made no illusions about who he was, what he did, where he came from. There was no holier than thou bullshit. There was no, this and this. He was exactly as advertised. And,
except for he wasn't that tall.
No, he was, and he was even littler when I saw him, to the point where I had met Lou, 15 years ago, let's say, and then walking in and seeing him walk in to do the podcast, and realizing, and the only thing that struck me was, my dad passed away a couple of years ago from cancer, and he got diagnosed the day after Christmas, and then he ended up passing away February 28th. So, it was about just over 2 months, and he was gone. Yeah, just over 2 months. And the last appointment that I took him to for his oncologist, he was 235, 240 pounds when he got diagnosed. He was 163 at the end.
Oh, damn.
So he couldn't get out of the car. So I actually kind of lunged forward, lifted him out of the car, put him in the wheelchair, took him up to his appointment. And then he didn't want to get out of the wheelchair. So I kind of scooped him up, and I did a one-legged lunge, and kind of lunged him and set him into the car, and realized I remember my dad as a big, strong man, doing everything. And now here I am picking him up and out of a wheelchair and lunging him forward. And that has been it's fucking haunting. And when I saw Louis walk in, I just almost this mixed emotion of wanting to throw up, wanting to cry, and getting goosebumps, and being taken back to that moment with my dad when I saw him walk in. And then feeling, the only word I can give it is, and I know Louis would spin in his fucking grave if I said blessed, but just feeling very privileged to have this moment with him, because I knew that the end was so close. So my dad also, from the cancer, he had this deal where his chest cavity was filling with fluid, so they had to keep draining him. Well, it was called a paracentesis. So they were pulling 8 to 10. It was like a gallon of fluid they were taking off him every 8 to 10 days. And when you're calculating out the protein and the calories, you're it's just a fucking equation until it takes him. And then coming in and seeing the edema and lose legs, and just kind of replaying this, and like meant like honestly, like this like mixed emotion of like, we got to do a podcast. We got to crush this thing because we have this one opportunity. Now I'm transported back to my own dad and I'm seeing this moment and knowing that like the time is near, but yet we got to do this man justice. And then also like wanting to like physically like give him a hug, but then also knowing that like hugging's not Louis. Yeah. You know, so like I shake his hand and like I like kind of paused and I was like, oh shit, dude, this is, I mean, knowing that like when I lunged my dad in the car, I knew the end was there. At that moment, I knew that thank God we're here to do this moment because he doesn't have much longer. Like I've seen this before. Yeah. And he knew he was at the end of his journey. And he, you know, and even Tom said he's going to give you a good 30 minutes. And he gave us an hour and 30 minutes. We were able to get double what I expected. And then finally I was like, that's it. That's all this old man's got. And I'm so thankful for it. But like the only word I can give it is like fortunate, just feeling very like that I did something right within my interaction and who I was as an individual, that this individual was willing to like on his desk doorstep to come and do our podcast out of respect for who I am and our relationship. So I had like all these fucking mixed emotions to like, even when we were leaving, you know, Lou, hey, take whatever you want. And I still was like, hey, here's money. Like, I don't want to take anything. Like you already gave us so much. Let me buy everything for everybody. And and we left there and I realized like that was the last time we were ever going to see that dude. And not knowing it was going to be 2 weeks later, but like realizing like he basically gave us a block of his time at the very end when he, you know, been so generous over the years with so many people. So I felt I felt like I did something right. And I was sad to see him go, but then also everybody has, this is everybody's journey. Everybody enters the world the same way. Everybody goes out and the mark that you have as an individual is how you're remembered. And he made his fucking mark and his name will be inscribed. And you know what, when he passed away, he got a fucking direct pass to Valhalla. I mean, it's funny. I was telling my daughters when we were watching this Last Kingdom, I've studied world religions from Christianity to every single one. And as I sat there and it's like, whatever you believe in, you know, is kind of irrelevant because they all have pretty much the same myths. I mean, they're all just different versions of the same story. But as we were reading through and we were talking about heaven and the other, Valhalla sounds like the place that I want to go, where I get to go and fucking battle and fight and drink and eat and feast forever with all of the baddest dudes on the planet. I hope they save me a place at the table because I'd like to go to Valhalla and Louis got a direct pass and we'll see him there.
You know, the only other time that I have felt like that was a perfect ending was whenever, what was his name? Tate said anything less would be disrespectful to the gods. Yeah. At the symposium. Like, what is that guy's name? Tate Fletcher or something like that? Yeah,
Tate Fletcher. He texted me today.
Yeah. That's, I'm glad you got that experience, John.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm glad that Charles and Tex got to be there. And I don't know, having had that experience with my dad, like seeing it in real time was like so many mixed emotions, but knowing like we have a responsibility to do this podcast and to put him in his best life. That's a fucking duty. You had a duty to do that. Well, and Tom even said, he goes, after Louis did the Joe Rogan deal, the Vice people came out and they were going to do some stuff and they basically tried to paint him like, this is some fucking, drug dealing, they just tried to really paint him in a negative light. So he hadn't done anything else. And so Tom was like, hey, Louis is going to do this, but tried to prep me. And I was like, dude, I would rather fucking fall on a sword than disrespect Louis. And, he called me on the phone to be in the West Side versus the World video. He called me up and was like, hey, John, we need a professional athlete. Will you do this? Sure. Whatever you need of me, I'm glad to help. And so I said to Tom, I'm like, dude, you don't think anybody's going to protect his legacy? I'm not trying to there's no gotcha moment in here. This is all about basically having a great conversation. And you know what? Love him or hate him. And there's a lot of people that fucking hate him. Louis was always super generous with me, always picked up the phone. I always had the best interaction. I had 16 meals in a row with him. So for 8 days.
All of Bob Evans, huh?
No, well, we would meet at Bob Evans and then we would go to lunch and then he would pick a different place. And I think we had like 16 dinners in a row. It was like fucking, like literally, it was like almost 3 weeks. We went to dinner every single night.
Okay, Sunday was the Chinese restaurant for dinner, right?
Yeah, it was
So
the Chinese, and then we went to it was like these different steakhouse things, what was it, like Texas Roadhouse, and we went to all these different places, and I was like, pick a different one. I can't eat at the Chinese place or Bob Evans anymore. and then we went to the pizza place, yeah, that's the deal, man. To quote Tate, anything less would just anger the gods, and you got to do respect. And I really think and it's so funny, my daughters are 10, and as we went through these different creation myths. Because I read them like the Norse mythology creation myths, how the world was really just a giant that got his fucking skull bashed in, and we're basically inside of his skull, which is it's all wacky shit. But as we were reading through it, I'm like, I kind of like the Norse ones the best, and Odin and Thor and the whole deal, and I like their creation. At the end, you get to go to Valhalla, but old men that die in their sheets without battle scars don't get to go to Valhalla, and Louis gets a fucking pass directly there.
Yeah, he does. Man. Yeah.
Well, dude, thanks for allowing us to steal a bunch of your time today, and thanks for taking us through the VVT and what you're doing, and thanks for being one of our favorite guests on Power Athlete Radio.
Hey, man, thanks for having me, guys. I'm honored.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be seeing you again soon, Brian, both at the NSCA conferences, and we got to get you back on. I can't believe it took us this long to.
You're not going to make an appearance at Summer Strong, are you?
I am. I'm speaking this year. So I'm actually going to kind of rehash a little bit of the what we did there. I'm going to sprinkle in a little bit more of my background to give some people some insights into, and it's not like I want to give people insight. It's that I want people to know that they're not alone. Because this shit is hard for me to talk about, my childhood and my background. But, if it weren't for other people helping me, to go get help and to deal with the things that I'd come up with, I wouldn't be here today. So I want to make sure that people get that it's not all sunshine and roses. And if I'm somebody's hero and they're struggling like I was, I want them to get help, and I want them to hear that it's okay to get help from one of those people.
We will be there, so I'll definitely buy you a beer, and we'll sit and bullshit. And if you need us to
beer's free, John.
Then you'll buy 2, Tex.
Yeah, the first round's on me.
I look forward to it. So we'll see you soon.
Liquor does it quicker, brother. That's what I'm saying.
I'll make sure to bring some then.
All right. Thank you, sir.
All right, amigo.
My pleasure.
Be good.
Bye.
All right.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.